Nice satellite graphic. Hi, everybody. Peter Greenberg here with this week's Global Travel Update, coming to you at midnight, local time here in Hong Kong. Hope you're having a great time where you happen to be. Lots of stuff to talk about. First of all, let me tell you how I got here. I started in Shanghai earlier in the week and then boarded a very interesting ship called the Yi Dun. You've never heard of this ship before, but you actually may have seen it before. It's the original Viking Sun from Viking Cruises. They've renamed it. They've reflagged it. It now flies a Chinese flag. It's now crewed by an entire Chinese officers and crew and staff. And what is it doing? For the first time in as many years as I can remember, it's taking Americans on an amazing cruise of coastal China, starting in Shanghai, coming down the coast all the way down to Xiamen and then into Hong Kong. And it could be a game changer in terms of reopening China in the post-pandemic world. Keep in mind that when I got to Shanghai, you could count the number of Americans on the streets on the fingers of one hand, and that included me. But it reminded me of when I first did this cruise on another cruise ship called the Pearl of Scandinavia back in 1984. We started in Kobe in Japan, cruised the inland sea, stopping in Nagasaki, which is unbelievable, and then around around south to the Yellow Sea, around North Korea, and up into Dalian, the former Port Arthur here in China, and then all the way down the coast, stopping in so many of those port cities I just mentioned, and then ending up here in Hong Kong. It was an amazing tour 40 years ago. It's an amazing tour now, and the folks who were on the ship were having just a great time because they've rearranged the itinerary to allow for a much deeper immersion into Chinese culture and stories, and of course interactions with the Chinese themselves. Most cruise ships will go somewhere at 7 in the morning, leave at 4 in the afternoon. Not this ship. It gets there at 7 in the morning, but maybe leaves the next day. That's a huge difference in the cruise itinerary world, and it allows for a much deeper immersion into the culture. I'm now here at the Peninsula in Hong Kong, where we are working on a number of other stories before flying to Alabama in a couple of days. So we've been traveling in the last 3 weeks. We've been in the Galapagos. We've been in New York. We've been in Mississippi. We've been in Atlanta. We've been in Shanghai. We're now in Hong Kong. And it's midnight. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for hanging in. Let's talk about some news items in the world. It's crazy. The Department of Transportation has announced a special investigation of major U.S. airlines and their frequent flyer programs, their quote unquote loyalty programs. This has been a long time in coming. And remember, under deregulation, there's no, it's the wild, wild west when it comes to frequent flyer programs, and there's no sheriff in town. It's becoming increasingly harder to earn miles and increasingly harder to redeem them. Do you know how many unredeemed miles there are right now out there in the world that people have earned legitimately and have been unable to redeem? Try 34 trillion. There's something wrong. And part of the DOT investigation is to look at how the airlines are manipulating the redemption levels, which they can do at any time under the terms of their agreement with you, and charge outrageous sums to redeem miles, even when there are nothing but empty seats on the plane. I want to show you something. This is what they wanted at Delta Airlines for a ticket in miles to go from Atlanta to Santiago. All right, do you see the figure there? Starts at 78,000 miles for basically a basic economy ticket. Go all the way to the right for the Delta One cabin, right? Their high-end business class cabin. They wanted 450,000 miles. I'll do some math for you before I show you something. 54% of all mileage earned is earned with credit cards, where you get 1 mile per dollar spent. So let's think about that. If you were to be stupid enough to redeem 450,000 miles for a one round trip business class ticket on Delta, that means you will have spent the equivalent of $402,000 for that seat. For $402,000, remember that's the 54% figure. For $402,000, you could charter 4 G5s and take 30 of your friends to Santiago. There is something wrong here. But wait, I'm just getting started. Let's go back to that figure of 450,000. You see it in the right-hand corner? All right, now let's pull up. At the very moment they're asking that mileage premium for any available seat on the plane, let's pull up the available seats on the plane. Was it full? Look again. Totally empty. Not a single taken seat, and they're still charging that mileage premium. Something is rotten in Denmark, or in this case, Santiago. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the DOT investigation not only reveals, but concludes. Because at least on the surface, there seems to be growing evidence, and I'm one of those people who believes in that evidence, that the airlines are making promises to you in their frequent flyer programs that at the time they're making those promises, they have little intention of keeping those promises. And if that's the case, then that meets a legal definition of a criminal fraud. So stay tuned. We're going to watch this very carefully because it affects just about everybody in the United States. Over 354 million individual frequent flyer accounts in this country. That's more than the population of America. So everybody's interested in what's going to happen in this investigation. Speaking of investigations, let's go back to the National Transportation Safety Board. You know, we had an incident that just happened in Atlanta earlier this week. A Delta Airlines A350 that was flying from Atlanta was taxiing down the center line. There was another Delta Airlines express plane, a small regional jet, that was holding on a taxiway. And somebody wasn't in the right position, and or somebody wasn't looking, because the A350, which was taxiing then at about 15 miles an hour, the wing of that plane literally sliced the tail completely off the CRJ. There's that CRJ. The pilots of the A350 didn't even know they did it. And the pilots of the CRJ didn't know what happened. They were reporting to the tower they had a sudden loss of electrical and hydraulics. And the tower had to tell them, that's because you no longer have a tail. We'll be watching that space carefully to let you know what really happened. But it does call into question who's watching the ground, not the air. We're not talking about the air traffic controllers. We're talking about the ground controllers. And are the airlines scheduling so many planes to be on the ground at the same time that this sort of a gridlock, or people are just traveling too closely and something like this happens? Thankfully, nobody was injured except the Delta Airlines regional jet that you see there may not be flying for a while. They might even dump it. They might even scrap it. Anyway, more on that as we learn more, but I wanted to share that with you. And then let's talk about the NTSB investigation, which of course they'll be investigating that, but they've also been investigating Boeing. We talked about Boeing for a long time, for many, many weeks on the show, but there's something else, because look at that investigation that just happened. They have a record of the CVR, the cockpit voice recording that happened on that plane, on both planes, and their conversations within the cockpit with the pilots, which will give them some indication as to who screwed up or may, and the conversation between the cockpit and the tower. Well, most CVRs have a very limited capacity to maintain those recordings in terms of time. And time again, the National Transportation Safety Board has asked that they insert new technology, which, by the way, is available, to give investigators a 25-hour window of recording in the cockpit on that plane, whatever plane it is, so they can look for patterns, look for problems that were not corrected or problems that were missed. It's essential in accident investigation. And the NTSB made an urgent safety recommendation to the FAA to change the rule to require CVRs to have a 25-hour limit. Right now they don't. They can be maybe they have an hour. Some of them only have 30 minutes. and some of them get recorded over before people realize there was a problem. No, times have changed. We need the 25 hours. But guess what the FAA did when the NTSB made the recommendation? They said it would cost the airlines too much money. It's a tape recorder. Stop it. The technology is already there. And the NTSB is very angry that the FAA slow walked this and has still slow walked this. Another thing the FAA has slow walked for the last 35 years, I know because I cover it every year. I'm the one yelling and screaming about it. And that is children under the age of 2, otherwise known as lap kids, should not be allowed to sit on their parents' laps during takeoff and landing. Now, how do we know that? There are too many crashes over the last 35 years, or hard landings, or aborted takeoffs, where the parents were holding their kids in their lap, their small children, and could not maintain their hold. The inertia and the physics of it just didn't allow it. And these kids became floating or flying missiles and were seriously hurt or worse. And after every accident investigation where that happened, the NTSB performed the appropriate tests under great scientific control and determined quite quickly that what was needed was an urgent safety recommendation to the FAA based on the weight of the young child. If the child was under 40 pounds, a rear-facing restraint seat. If it was under 90 pounds, a forward-facing restraint seat. And over 90 pounds, it needed its own seat and seat belt. So what did the FAA do with this urgent safety recommendation? Well, first of all, it wasn't just based on a hunch by the NTSB. They went to their own testing labs and got baby crash test dummies, put them on a sled, and simulated those hard landings or aborted takeoffs. And in every single case, right, where there was not a restraint seat, that kid was a missile. All right, then they tried it with the restraint seats. Those kids survived. So they went to the FAA with portfolio. They went to the FAA and said, look, here's the problem. Here's the solution. We can implement the solution. What did the FAA do? Ignored them or slow walked it or said it would cost the industry too much money. That's not the FAA's job. The FAA is not supposed to interpret cost benefit, even though they think it's part of the charter. Their job is to regulate safety and enforce those rules. So it's a little crazy because here we are 30 years later and the FAA has done nothing. Absolutely nothing. So we'll be watching that space as well. Let's say a couple of people while we're up and awake here in Hong Kong. Let me scroll down here. There we go. Now I can start. Priya is watching from Chicago. As always, love to see you. Harriet and Jim, in Halifax, Nova Scotia, one of my favorite cities. If you get a chance, go to a restaurant there called The Bicycle Thief. There's a very interesting story associated with that name of that restaurant. And then go to the Maritime Museum there. It's an amazing collection from the Titanic. No, they just didn't import the items. The Titanic was headed for Halifax, excuse me, when it hit that iceberg. Lots of stuff to see there. And great food. All right, hope you're having a great time there. Matthew's saying hello from Syracuse. Sue saying hi from, the Royal Barbados, okay, from Sandals. Mr. Cooney, I'm assuming you're off the ship by now. Melanie's saying, greetings from Miami. Question, my husband and I are planning to go to India in November of 2025. We will only have a week there as stopping in Dubai en route for 3 days. How would you split up the week between Mumbai and Delhi? How many days in each city and any must-sees in each place? If you're only going to be there a week, I mean, why are you going to 2 cities? Stay in one. It's just, India is amazing and it's overwhelming. And I say that in the best way. It's amazing and it's overwhelming. Stay in Mumbai. You say you're staying at the Taj after Delhi, so that's great. I see. No, I misinterpreted. You're going to the Taj Mahal. I thought you meant the Taj Hotel. If you're going to go to Delhi and you want to go see the Taj Mahal, do what I do. Leave your hotel at 3 a.m, get a car and a driver. I don't care what they tell you. And get there before the sun rises. You want to be there at dawn to have your moment before the tour buses arrive. Okay? And I don't care what anybody tells you, oh, you cannot go that hour early. Yes, you can. Just do it. Otherwise, you'll be arm in arm and neck, and it won't be a great experience. Okay. Ken saying, greetings from Colorado. We will be on that ship Wednesday. Oh, you're going to be on the Yidun. Congratulations. You're going to have a great time. Literally a great time. Hello to Raymond Bixon. And Jan is saying, from coastal idyllic town of Salabreña in the province of Granada. Ole. Okay. Okay. Camilla is saying, cheers from Mission Beach. Priya is saying, is it possible to visit key places in New Zealand without a car or by cruise? Yeah. Are the trains in New Zealand comparable to European ones? No, they're not. But, there's the North Island and the South Island. What I did the very first time I went is I took my chances and I rented a car because you drive it on the wrong side of the road. But I drove it down to Wellington and then got on the ferry. And I drove it down to the south part of the North Island and then took the ferry to Wellington. And that was great. And then all the way down to Queensland and Queenstown. It was amazing. So, there are good roads there, but the ferry works between the North and the South Island. Okay, Ingrid saying hi. Rochelle saying, Delta is the worst. I've really seen a shift in their mileage gouging the past 18 months. Rochelle, you're a little late. I've seen a shift in their mileage gouging for the past 20 years. Seriously. Does anybody remember when mileage programs started back in 1981 when you actually were rewarded for your loyalty? Anybody remember that? Remember those little coupons you had to stick to the printed tickets? And the minute you got 25,000 miles, you were notified that you qualified for a free domestic ticket anywhere the airline flew, and you could actually redeem it. Remember those days? Oof, they're not here. That's the problem. Okay, here we go. I purchased a Delta One Premier One on Aeromexico and was advertised only one left at about $850, and the price hasn't changed since, and that was like March of this year. Okay, here's the problem. Anytime you go online to make a reservation, and I'm serious about this, and you've seen it, whether it's a hotel or an airline that say only one room left or only 2 seats left, it's sort of a lie. Because what they're really telling you is there are only 2 seats left in the allocation they were given by the travel provider. Now, if you go to the travel provider's own website, you may see so many empty seats like that Delta example, you can go bowling on the plane. So the 1 seat left deal doesn't cut it with me unless I actually see it on the airline's own website, not an OTA. Not an OTA. Okay. Melanie says, I rarely have ever used my AA miles on AA flights, especially to the UK. For Dubai and India, I'll be using my miles on one of their partner airlines like Qatar or Emirates or Finnair for $70K in business class each way. That is a bargain. I don't know how you did that, Melanie. Congratulations. Go with God. Get on the plane. That is a reasonable redemption level. And then she says, in business class each way, rather than what American Airlines wanted, which is 300,000 miles of the same route. And by the way, given the world of code sharing, it's highly likely that American flight is operated by Qatar. How about that? It's this crazy different inventory, different pricing model that is intentionally confusing, and many of us end up giving up and paying a higher fare that we don't need to pay. But you bring up an interesting point. Okay. Colleen saying, looks like we will be required to obtain a $10 travel permit to enter the UK next year, and we will also need some sort of visa. Yeah, it's true. Let me explain. They just announced in the UK that there's going to be an entry fee. Why did that happen? Because the European community, remember, they're not, remember Brexit? The European community now is saying you have to have an ETIAS, right, starting next year. What is that, ETIAS? It's an electronic visa. It's a travel approval letter that you have to apply for online, pay for online. I believe it's about $9, and then print it out so you can take it with you in order to be able to enter the country. Not only that, in order to ever get on the plane in the first place to go to that country, no airline will board you without that letter and that certificate, simply because they'll get fined if they knowingly or even unwittingly take a passenger on a flight to Europe that doesn't have that piece of paper. Speaking of that, November 10th is coming. You know what day that is? Speaking of Europe, that's the day that passport stamps say arrivederci, the end of passport stamps in the European Union countries. So if you're flying around, you want those stamps to fill up the book, do it soon. We're going to a biometric world, and we're going to see a lot of e-gates, which is great. But for sentimentalists like me who love having a passport with all those stamps as a record of your travels, get ready to kiss that goodbye. Okay. Would I recommend the Viking you don't experience to others? Yes, Ken, I would. It's a look. Viking was a pioneer in river cruising in China. They know the market very well. They're trusted by the Chinese, which is a huge deal. These are not humongous passenger ships of 8,000 or 9,000 people. They're only holding about 900, but they're not using them full. They're only going to take about 660 at the time, and it's well worth it. And you'll have great service. But most importantly, you get a chance to immerse in the culture, and I hope that's one of the reasons why you're going. Okay, Pamela saying hello from Silverdale, Washington. Craig is saying hello from Tucson. Lorena is saying, if you're traveling from the U.S. through Amsterdam and on to Kenya, do you need a European visa? If you're transiting through Amsterdam, no. Would I get one? Yeah. You want one just so you can go anywhere you want in Europe, right? Don't get aced out. It's not a big expense. I think it's under $10. Get yourself with the ETIAS, and that kicks in a couple months. Okay. Michelle's saying, who are the people and their names on the FAA? We're thinking names. Can you provide an email address so professionally polite emails can be sent to them to basically remind them to stop the madness? Yeah. Well, who do you think the FAA reports to? Pete Buttigieg, the U.S. Department of Transportation Secretary. That's who you're right. Okay, Karen says, I can't find the China cruise you talked about from Dalian to Hong Kong. Oh, because that one doesn't exist. That existed 40 years ago. That was called the Pearl of Scandinavia. I still remember the captain's name, Helmut Klosterman. But the Viking cruise starts in Shanghai and goes south. So that's the way you want. If you go on the Viking website or get their catalog, you'll see that cruise. Okay. Craig says, really seems like Delta is more of a credit card company than an airline now. Doesn't seem like it. It is. They make more money from their frequent flyer program selling miles to credit card companies, in the Delta case to American Express, than they make actually operating as airlines. If they didn't have the revenue from the miles that they sell the airlines, that applies to United with Chase and American with Citibank, they'd almost have to Chapter 7 the airlines. That's how crazy the balance is, not in sync. They're making more money from the frequent flyer programs, selling miles, and here goes back to the DOT investigation, selling miles to banks, and then they know when they sell the miles to the banks, that's the argument, and the banks know when they buy the miles from the airlines, that then the banks give you when you use their credit card at 26% interest, that the odds of redeeming those miles are slim and never, right? That's what we got to watch out for in this investigation. Okay. Patty says we need restaurants in Istanbul. Oh, that's an easy one, Patty. First of all, let us know where you're staying, how long you're going to be there, and I'll make some recommendations. Tayo is saying, do I like the smaller economy carriers in Europe like Ryanair when you travel, or do I prefer the train? Let me think. Ryanair or a train in Europe? I'd even take Amtrak over Ryanair. But the European trains are great. It's not even a contest. Take the train. Ingrid wants to know, how many passport books do I have? Mind-boggling, she says, I bet. I can tell you. I have 12. Not because I'm not that old. No, because I either filled out the pages and had to get a new one, or at one point, passports weren't valid for 10 years. They were valid for 5. Now they're valid for 10. So I have I've kept every passport I've ever had since I was 12 years old. And one day I'm going to get some plexiglass together and do a display. But anyway, there's your answer. Okay. Oh, can I suggest an airline to travel to Hong Kong and Taiwan? Well, listen, you haven't told me where you're flying from, so I can't answer you. Let me know. Oh, now you're saying it's from the East Coast. Not enough information. What city in the East Coast? Let me know. Uh, uh, oh, Simon says, I thought you had to forfeit your passport book before you get a new one. No, you can always tell you want to keep it. And what they'll do is they'll literally punch a hole about this big through the cover of the passport, rendering it invalid, but not rendering it not valuable to you if you're a sentimentalist like me. Sue says, I can't believe the airfare to Aruba in February is $1,340 per person. Well, that's high season in Aruba. And airlift down there is not great. You know, the airlines serving the Caribbean are really extortionists. One airline in particular went to American Airlines. It was American Airlines. They went to the government of St. Lucia, and they said, you know, we only have like one flight here a day. If you want us to continue just this mediocre service, you're going to have to pay us X million dollars a year to keep it going. And you know what? The airline felt it had no choice. They paid them. What a dangerous precedent that set. Well, now we're seeing it starting to happen in other locations. Not pretty. Okay, here we go. Pamela's saying taking a Trans-Pacific cruise September 30th. That's coming up. To October 15th, Seattle to Tokyo. What are the seas like during this time? Not particularly good, I have to tell you. The North Pacific, which is where you're going to be, can be pretty rough, or as Larry would say, pretty rough. But then again, don't take Dramamine, bring Marazine. It doesn't knock you out. And book a center inside cabin on the cruise ship. Seems counterintuitive since it's the cheapest cabin on the ship, but think center of gravity. When the ship is doing this, right, cabin's not really moving. When it's doing this, cabin's not really moving. The higher up you go, the more you're on one side of the ship or the other with your fabulous balcony. That's when you're going to end up having a conversation with the porcelain telephone. Okay. And, did you use Alipay, WeChat, or other apps while in Shanghai? Jennifer, you raised an interesting point. Communication right now in China, in those major cities, is not stellar. You almost have to have a VPN to be able to get out. The Chinese, for a number of years now, have disabled, a lot of those fabulous fun sites, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or anything. And unless you have that VPN that you can get, and you can subscribe to it like for a week, and it's not expensive, it's like $3, you'll be fine. Okay. But if you think you're going to get on Wi-Fi on your phone, or you think you're going to get on great internet service on your laptop, think again. They sort of shut it down. Okay. Let's go to the photo of the week. I love this photo. And let me tell you what it is. I mean, it's a little bit deceptive, but I'll tell you what it is. Where was this taken? First of all, congratulations to Beverly Epstein. And she writes, I took this picture on a cruise ship called the Viking Octantis, another Viking ship, this past January. The ship started from Ushuaia, where it has one of my favorite restaurants, by the way. Anybody who's ever going to Ushuaia, go to a restaurant called Kaupe, K-A-U-P-E. You'll thank me. Okay. So it was from Ushuaia, Argentina, and sailed to Antarctica. We faced huge waves in the Drake's Passage, the reason why they call it the Drake Shake. And the waves were up to 20 feet high. It took us around 36 hours to cross Drake's Passage. That's normal, by the way. The day after we reached this Chiraguama Bay, where the waters were calmer. That's not just waters that are calmer. Those are waters that are glass, right? And I was amazed by the strength of the sailboat. How did it survive those rough waters? Years ago, this ships were sailed to and from Antarctica, and that's why they survived, because they were purpose-built ships for those waters. Lovely photograph. I'd love to know who owns that ship and see if they want to invite me. It's always happy to do that. All right, let me scroll down a few more things. Okay. You want to visit Hong Kong and Taiwan in early October. Travel from Philadelphia. Would you suggest an airline? Well, listen, you want to go nonstop to Taipei? You can if you go through Kennedy, and that's a pretty good flight. If not, you're going to be doubling back. You're going to be either flying to Manila and then up to Taiwan, or Hong Kong, more than likely Hong Kong into Taiwan or Tokyo. But I don't recommend any one airline. The Asian airlines tend to know the area so much better and are better all-weather flyers in that regard. So when I came in here today, I came in on an Asian airline, otherwise known as, well, it's a Swire Company airline, but it's based here in Hong Kong, called Cathay Pacific. Okay? And those guys, I mean, I place myself in their capable hands every time I travel because they do such a great job. Okay, there you go. A couple more things of housekeeping note. Of course, Hidden Belize still on the air. Our next season of Travel Detective is on the air right now. So check that out. And of course, our radio show coming this Saturday from the Peninsula in Shanghai. Check it out. Lots of interesting stories and storytellers. And of course, let us know what you think of the new season of Travel Detective. It's now about 12:30 in the morning here in Hong Kong. And I'm going to say something that my parents used to say when I was a kid. It's a school night. So I'm going to bed. But I wish you a great rest of the week. I hope to see you on the radio on Saturday. Anthony, thank you so much for helping us out on the broadcast today. And we'll see you next week from the U.S. and a surprise destination in and of itself. See you next week. In the meantime, be safe, be smart, and have a great rest of the week.